Part 1, The Ghost Hallways. The sky wasn't even gray anymore. It was this bruised, sickly purple color that made your skin crawl. By 7 a.m., the wind chill in Chicago had hit $-45 F dollar. The kind of cold that doesn't just bite, it inhales you. It turns your breath into needles and freezes the moisture on your eyeballs. My phone had been buzzing with emergency alerts since midnight. Stay indoors. Record-breaking polar vortex. Every school in the district sent out the do not come in blast at 5 a.m. But my dad? My dad is old school. To him, an emergency alert is just a suggestion. He didn't even check his email. He just saw me sitting in the kitchen and said, "Mark, get your boots on. I'm not raising a quitter. If the bus doesn't show, I'm dropping you off." He dropped me at the south entrance of Lincoln Heights High. The parking lot was an ice rink, abandoned. I should have stayed in the truck. I should have begged him to take me home. But I was 17, tired of being called soft, and I figured maybe a few people would show up. The heavy steel doors were actually unlocked, a glitch in the remote security system because of the frost. I stepped inside, and the silence hit me like a physical weight. The heaters were humming, but it was a strained, dying sound. The lockers looked like silver ribs in the dim morning light. I walked 10 feet and realized I was completely alone. Or so I thought. "Mark." I jumped, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Standing by the trophy case was Leo, a kid from my AP Chem class who lived for perfect attendance. Behind him were the twins, Jax and Chloe. They looked pale, shivering even though they were wrapped in North Face parkas. "The door's locked behind us," Leo said, his voice cracking. He pointed at the south entrance. The magnetic seal froze over. "We're stuck in the vestibule. So go out the north exit," I said, trying to sound like I wasn't terrified. "We tried," Chloe whispered, her eyes red. "Mark, all the electronic locks are dead. The school's on a deep freeze power save mode. Nobody is supposed to be here. The system thinks the building is empty, so it's sealing everything to keep the heat in." I walked over to the windows by the main office. I scraped a circle of frost off the glass with my fingernail and looked out. I couldn't even see the street. It was just a wall of white. A whiteout, so thick it felt like we were underwater. And then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The hum of the heaters dropped an octave. A low, grinding metallic groan echoed through the vents. "Guys," Jack said, looking up at the ceiling. "Did the air just get colder?" I looked at the thermostat on the wall. 62 degrees Fahrenheit. 5 seconds later, it clicked down to 61 degrees Fahrenheit. We weren't just stuck in a school. We were trapped in a 500,000 square foot icebox, and the world outside didn't even know we existed. Part 2. The dying heart. The flickering didn't stop. It settled into this rhythmic, nauseating pulse, like the school was having a seizure. Every time the lights dimmed, the shadows in the long hallway towards the gym seemed to stretch a few inches closer to us. "We need to call someone," Chloe said, her voice trembling. She pulled out her phone, the screen illuminating her face in a ghostly blue. No bars. Not even for emergency calls. The storm must have knocked out the local tower. I pulled mine out. Same thing. Searching. "The school Wi-Fi is down too," Leo added, pacing in a tight circle. "The deep freeze mode probably cut the routers to save juice for the boiler. But guys, if the boiler isn't getting enough power to run the pumps, the pipes are going to burst. And once the water stops moving, it freezes," I finished for him. "And then the heat is gone for good." I looked at the thermostat. 58 degrees Fahrenheit. It was dropping faster now. The building was losing the war against the $-45 monster outside. "The principal's office," Jack sparked, pointing toward the main admin wing. "There's a landline there. Those things work even when the power's wonky, right?" We started moving. It felt weird to walk through the halls without the roar of 1,000 students. Our footsteps echoed like gunshots. Every locker creak, every groan of the building settling under the weight of the snow made us jump. We reached the office, but the heavy glass door was locked tight. Magnetic seal. "Step back," Jack said. He didn't wait for an answer. He took a heavy decorative bronze bust of some former dean from a nearby pedestal and slammed it against the glass. Crack. The sound was deafening in the silence. It didn't shatter. This was reinforced safety glass, but it spiderwebbed. Jax hit it again and again, his breath coming in ragged white plumes. Finally, he kicked a hole through it and reached in to hit the manual release. We scrambled inside. I grabbed the desk phone. I didn't even dial 911 first. I dialed my dad. Nothing. Not even a dial tone. Just a hollow, static hiss that sounded like the wind outside. "It's dead," I whispered, slamming the receiver down. "The lines must be down somewhere under the snow." Suddenly, a loud bang erupted from the basement levels, the kind of sound that vibrates in your teeth. Then a high-pitched whistling started, coming through the vents. It sounded like a scream. "That's a pressure release valve," Leo whispered, his face turning an ashy gray. "The boiler. It's failing, Mark. If we don't get down to the maintenance room and manually bypass the sleep mode, this whole place will be a tomb by noon." "The basement." Chloe shook her head, backing away. "It's pitch black down there. And that's where the backup generators are. If they don't kick in." As if on cue, the lights gave one final, violent surge and then blackout. Complete, crushing darkness. The kind of dark where you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. The only sound was the four of us breathing, and that terrifying whistling from the depths of the school. "Phone lights," I commanded, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Now!" 4 thin beams of light cut through the dark. In the shadows of the office, the filing cabinets looked like tombstones. "We have to go down," I said. "If we stay here and wait for the sun, we'll be blocks of ice before it even rises." Part 3. The Concrete Labyrinth. The stairs leading to the basement felt like descending into a throat. The air down here didn't just feel cold. It felt heavy, thick with the smell of damp concrete and old oil. Our phone lights were pathetic against the vast, consuming blackness of the utility corridors. "Stay close," I whispered, my voice echoing off the low ceilings. "If someone trips, we stop. Nobody gets separated." The whistling sound was louder now, a jagged, metallic shriek that made my ears bleed. It was coming from the far end of the Snake Pit, the nickname for the tangled mess of pipes and electrical conduits that ran under the gym. "Mark, look." Chloe pointed her light at the floor. A thin sheet of ice was already forming on the concrete. One of the pipes had cracked, and a fine mist was spraying into the air, freezing instantly upon contact with the floor. The deep freeze mode had been too successful. It had slowed the water flow so much that the lines were beginning to choke on their own ice. "The boiler room is behind the cafeteria stores," Leo said, his teeth chattering so hard I thought they'd snap. "If we can reach the manual override, we can force the system to dump all the remaining emergency power into the heating coils. It'll drain the batteries in hours, but it'll buy us time." We rounded the corner into the cafeteria storage area. Stacks of giant canned peaches and industrial-sized flour bags looming like monoliths in our light beams. Suddenly, Jack stopped. He swung his light toward the back of the room, near the walk-in freezer. "Did you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The pipes?" I asked, my grip tightening on my phone. "No," Jax whispered. "Like scraping. Metal on metal." We all went dead silent. For 3 seconds, all I heard was the blood thumping in my temples. Then, from the darkness behind the heavy steel shelves, came a slow, deliberate clink clink clink. Like someone was dragging a heavy chain across the floor. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded small, pathetic. The scraping stopped. "Is someone there?" Chloe's voice was an octave higher. "Mr. Henderson? Is that the janitor?" No answer. Only the sound of the wind howling through a gap in the foundation somewhere above us. It sounded like a wounded animal. "It's just the building settling," Leo said, though his hand was shaking so much his light was dancing all over the walls. "Thermal expansion. Or contraction. The metal is shrinking because of the cold. Let's just move." We pushed past the storage racks toward the boiler room door. I grabbed the heavy iron handle. It was so cold it felt like it burnt my palm through my glove. I heaved it open. The boiler room was a nightmare of steam and shadows. The main unit, a massive rusted beast from the 1950s, was vibrating violently. Red warning lights were blinking on the control panel, the only color in the entire room. "Warning, pressure critical. Pump failure. Leo, do your thing." I yelled over the roar of the steam. Leo scrambled to the panel, his fingers flying across the manual switches. "The bypass is locked. It needs a physical key turn at the secondary pump station." "Where's that?" Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with genuine terror. "It's at the other end of the tunnel. Under the locker rooms. Someone has to crawl through the maintenance pipe trench to get there." The trench was a 3-foot-wide concrete crawlspace packed with burning hot steam pipes and freezing cold water lines. It was a death trap. "I'll go," Jack said, stepping forward. "I'm the smallest. I can make it." "Jax, no." Chloe grabbed his arm. "The scraping. What if something is down there?" "We don't have a choice, Chloe," Jack said, handing her his phone. "If that boiler blows, this whole wing of the school becomes a crater. Give me a flashlight." I watched him drop to his knees and disappear into the dark, narrow hole of the trench. 5 seconds later, his voice came back to us, muffled and hollow. "I'm in. It's tight in here. And Mark?" "Yeah, there's something down here. There are footprints in the frost. Big ones." Part 4. The sound in the walls. The silence that followed Jax's voice was worse than the screaming pipes. Chloe was frozen, her flashlight beam trembling on the lip of the crawlspace. "Footprints." I leaned closer to the opening. "Jax, what do you mean footprints? Like a worker?" "No," Jax's voice came back, echoing with a strange metallic hollow. "They're weird. Not boots. It looks like someone was walking here in socks. Or bare feet. Who the hell walks in an unheated crawlspace in $-45-degree weather without shoes?" "Just get to the pump, Jax," Leo shouted at the hole, his eyes darting to the pressure gauge. 90 psi. The red needle was vibrating in the danger zone. "You have 60 seconds, or the safety seals are going to melt." We heard the sound of Jax's heavy breathing and the rhythmic thump scrape of him dragging his body over the frozen concrete. "I see the valve," Jax called out. Wait. What the?" He stopped. "Jax, talk to us," Chloe screamed. "There's a coat," Jax whispered. "A janitor's jacket. It's stuffed into the intake fan. That's why the pressure is building. Someone did this. Someone jammed the..." A sudden, violent thud echoed through the floorboards. It didn't come from the trench. It came from the ceiling directly above our heads, the cafeteria. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. But they weren't rhythmic like a person walking. They were erratic, heavy, followed by the sound of something metal being dragged. Clink, clink, clink. The same sound we heard in the storage room. Someone's up there, Chloe whispered, turning her light toward the stairs we had just descended. But the school was locked. You saw it, Mark. The magnetic seals. Maybe they were already inside, I said, the realization chilling me more than the air. Maybe someone stayed behind when the evacuation happened. Someone who didn't want to leave. Suddenly, the whistling from the boiler stopped. Jax! Leo yelled. Did you turn it? No answer. Jax! The pressure is dropping, did you do it? Still nothing. Only the sound of a faint, wet coughing coming from the trench. Jax, this isn't funny. I knelt down and shoved my flashlight into the hole. The beam traveled 20 feet down the narrow concrete tunnel. I saw Jax's boots. He wasn't moving. He was lying flat on his stomach. And standing over his legs, hunched in the shadows where the light barely reached, was a figure. It was tall, too tall, wearing a tattered, gray maintenance uniform that looked decades old. Its skin was the color of a fish's belly, translucent and blue-veined. It didn't have shoes. Its toes were blackened with frostbite, snapping like dry twigs as it shifted its weight. It wasn't looking at Jax. It was looking directly down the tunnel, straight into my light. Its eyes weren't eyes, they were just milky, white orbs reflecting the glare. Mark. Jax's voice was a pathetic whimper. It's touching my hair. The thing in the tunnel tilted its head. Then it let out a sound that didn't belong in a human throat, a low, clicking growl, like a radiator cooling down. Run! I screamed, grabbing Chloe by the jacket and lunging backward. Leo, get out of there. But Leo was staring at the pressure gauge. It wasn't dropping anymore. It was spiking. The creature hadn't fixed the boiler, it had finished breaking it. Part 5, the pressure cooker. We can't leave him. Chloe screamed, her voice tearing through the roar of the steam. She tried to lung toward the crawl space, but I caught her waist, swinging her back. He's right there. Mark, he's right there. Leo, move. I roared. Leo finally snapped out of his trance, but it was too late. The main gasket on the primary steam line, overburdened by the blockage Jax found, finally gave way. A jet of scalding, white-hot vapor exploded from the pipe right next to the control panel. The sound was like a jet engine igniting in a small room. Leo screamed as the edge of the steam caught his arm, throwing him backward into the stacks of empty metal crates. The room filled with mist instantly. Our phone beams were useless now, just glowing white circles in a thick fog. We were blind. Jax! I yelled into the hole, but the sound of the escaping steam drowned out everything. Then, through the white haze, I saw a movement. The figure from the trench didn't crawl out, it slithered. It moved with a sickening, fluid grace, its long, frostbitten limbs clicking against the floor. It was coming out of the hole, and it was dragging something heavy. Jax is out, Chloe cried, seeing a shape on the floor. No, Chloe, get back! I grabbed a heavy iron wrench from a nearby workbench. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. The figure emerged from the steam. It wasn't dragging Jax. It was dragging the janitor's jacket Jax had mentioned, but now it was soaked in something dark and steaming. The creature stood up. It was nearly 7 feet tall, its spine curved like a question mark to avoid hitting the low basement pipes. It looked at us with those milky, sightless eyes, and then it did something that made my stomach turn. It inhaled. It took a long, rattling breath of the scalding steam, its chest expanding like a bellows. It seemed to thrive on the heat that should have been blistering its skin. The gym, I hissed, grabbing Leo by his good arm and hauling him up. He was whimpering, clutching his scalded skin. The gym has the manual fire exit with the crash bar. We have to get to the main level. What about Jax? Chloe was sobbing now, but she was moving. He's still in the trench. If he's smart, he's crawling to the other end. I lied. I didn't know if he was alive. I just knew that if we stayed in this basement, we were all dead. We scrambled for the stairs, the creature's clicking footsteps right behind us. Click, click, click. It wasn't running. It was stalking. It knew we had nowhere to go. We burst through the heavy doors into the cafeteria. The temperature here had plummeted. Our breath was thick, and ice had crystallized on the tables. We ran past the kitchen, our footsteps thundering on the tiles. Suddenly, a massive boom shook the floor beneath us. The boiler. It hadn't just failed, it had detonated. The lights in the cafeteria, which had been flickering, surged one last time and then exploded in a shower of sparks. Down! I yelled, pulling them to the floor as glass rained down. In the sudden, absolute darkness, the only sound was the wind screaming outside, and a new sound. Clink, clink, clink. It was on the main floor now. It had followed us up. And this time it wasn't alone. From the other end of the dark cafeteria, near the student lounge, we heard a matching sound. Clink, clink, clink. There were 2 of them. Part 6, the Blue Zone. The silence that followed the boiler explosion was even more terrifying than the noise. It was a dead, vacuum-like quiet, broken only by the tinkling of falling frost from the ceiling tiles. The heat was gone. Completely. Within minutes, the temperature in the cafeteria began to equalize with the $45 text F dollar outside. My arm. Leo groaned, his voice a ragged whisper. The steam burn on his forearm was already starting to turn a waxy, sickly white. In this cold, his body was pulling blood away from his skin to save his organs. Shock was setting in. Don't look at it, Leo. Just keep moving, I hissed, scanning the darkness with my phone light. The two clinking sounds were converging. One from the kitchen, one from the hallway. They were hurting us. The gym, I whispered. If we can make it through the double doors, we can barricade them. The gym has those thick oak doors with the iron bars. We stayed low, crawling behind the rows of plastic cafeteria tables. Every time my knee hit the floor, it felt like hitting a block of dry ice. Chloe was holding onto the back of my jacket, so hard I could hear the fabric straining. We were halfway to the doors when a beam of light from Chloe's phone swiped across the serving line. One of them was standing on top of the industrial refrigerator. It was crouched like a gargoyle, its long, spindly fingers hooked into the metal casing. It wasn't wearing a uniform like the one in the basement. This one was wearing a high school letterman jacket, faded, moth-eaten, and stiff with decades of filth. The name on the chest read Cooper. It didn't have a face. Not really. Just a tight mask of frostbitten skin pulled over a skull, with a lipless mouth that stayed permanently open in a silent, frozen scream. Mark, Chloe breathed, her voice failing. The thing on the fridge didn't move. It just watched us with those dead, milky marble eyes. Then it let out a sound, not a growl, but a mimicry. Mark, help me, it's so cold. It was Jax's voice. Perfectly pitched. The exact same tone he'd used in the trench. Oh God, Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jax, did it take his voice? It's not him, Chloe. Don't listen. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the gym doors. The creature on the fridge didn't jump down. It just tilted its head, and then the second one, the one in the janitor's clothes, stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. It was holding a heavy length of rusted chain. Clink, clink, clink. Go, run, I yelled. We sprinted. The cold air felt like swallowing broken glass. My lungs were burning, my legs felt like lead. We reached the gym doors, scrambled inside, and I slammed the heavy iron crossbar into place just as a massive weight hit the other side. Bam! The wood groaned. The doors shuddered in their frames. Bam! Help me with the bleachers. I shouted to Leo, who was leaning against the wall, fading fast. We grabbed the handle of the retractable bleachers and pulled with everything we had. The heavy metal structure screeched across the floor, blocking the entrance. It wouldn't hold them forever, but it gave us a minute. I turned around and shone my light across the vast, empty gym. The floor was covered in a layer of fine white powder, snow that had been sucked in through the roof vents. And then I saw it. In the center of the basketball court, under the giant school logo, were 4 sleeping bags. They were old, dusty, and arranged in a neat circle. Next to them were stacks of frozen cafeteria trays, piled high like an altar. These things weren't just inside the school. They lived here. They had been living here for years, waiting for a storm big enough to turn the building into their kingdom. Mark, Leo whispered, pointing toward the high windows near the ceiling. Look at the moon. The clouds had parted for a second. The moonlight hit the gym floor, and I realized why they hadn't followed us into the center of the room yet. The moonlight was passing through the ice-covered windows, creating blue zones. Patches of light that were even colder than the shadows. Inside those blue patches, the air was shimmering. And inside one of those patches, standing perfectly still, was Jax. He was standing upright, his eyes wide, his skin completely blue. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. He was a human popsicle, frozen solid in a matter of seconds. And the creature in the letterman jacket was standing right behind him, its long, pale fingers resting gently on Jax's shoulders, like a coach giving a pep talk. Part 7, The Cryogenic Trap. Jax! Chloe's voice was a broken whisper. She took a step forward, her hand reaching out into the empty, freezing air. Chloe, stop. Don't go into the light. I tackled her just as her foot brushed the edge of one of those shimmering blue patches. The moonlight wasn't just light. The way it was refracting through the hyperdense ice on the skylights, it was creating pockets of absolute zero. The air in those blue zones wasn't just cold, it was liquid. Anything that stepped into it didn't just freeze. Their molecular structure literally stopped. Jax wasn't just dead. He was a statue of flesh and ice, preserved in the exact moment of his final terror. The creature in the letterman jacket, the one we called Cooper, let out a dry, rattling hiss. It began to push Jax. Slowly, methodically. It was sliding the frozen body of our friend across the ice-slick gym floor like a chess piece. It's using him as a shield, Leo choked out. He was slumped against the bleachers, his breathing shallow. The frost on his eyelashes was becoming a solid crust. It knows we won't throw anything at him. It's playing with us. Clink, clink, clink. The janitor creature was now pacing the perimeter of the gym, staying just outside the moonlight. It was dragging its chain against the metal heater vents, creating a rhythmic, hypnotic sound that seemed to vibrate inside my skull. We have to get to the equipment room, I whispered, leaning close to Chloe. The emergency flares. Every gym has a kit for the coaches in case of a lockdown or power failure. If we can get fire, if we can create heat, those things might back off. And if they don't? Chloe asked, her eyes never leaving Jax's frozen face. Then we use the flares to set the gym mats on fire. We burn this whole place down with us in it. I'd rather go out in a fire than end up like a statue in their collection. We began to edge along the wall, moving toward the coach's office. Every time we moved, the Cooper creature would mirror us, sliding Jax's frozen corpse an inch further, keeping him directly between us and the center of the room. Its milky eyes were fixed on mine, watching for a flinch, a slip, a moment of weakness. Suddenly, Leo stumbled. His boots slid on a patch of black ice, and he let out a sharp cry of pain as his burnt arm hit the floor. The Cooper creature didn't hesitate. It let go of Jax and leaped. It didn't run like a human. It launched itself off the floor, its long limbs unfolding like a spider's. It soared through the air, bypassing the blue zones with a terrifying, calculated jump. "Leo, look up!" I screamed. I swung my flashlight like a club. The heavy mag light connected with the creature's midsection in midair. It felt like hitting a frozen log, dead, hard, and hollow. The impact sent a shockwave up my arm that nearly dislocated my shoulder. The creature hissed, a sound like dry leaves skittering on pavement, and skidded across the floor. It didn't feel pain. It just scrambled back onto its feet, its head snapping 180 degrees to look at me while its body remained facing Leo. "The door! Chloe, the office!" I yelled. I grabbed Leo by the collar of his coat and literally dragged him the last 10 feet. Chloe slammed the office door shut and threw the deadbolt just as the creature's long, blackened claws shredded the wood of the door frame. We were in, but it was a cage. The office had no windows. Just a desk, a rack of basketballs, and the emergency cabinet. And then the sound from the vents changed. The high-pitched whistling of the failing boiler was gone. It was replaced by a low, guttural humming. "Mark," Leo whispered, pointing to the floor. A thick, white mist was beginning to seep in through the gap under the door. It wasn't steam. It was the blue zone air. They were forcing the super-chilled air from the gym into the small office to flash freeze us where we stood. The temperature in the room plummeted. My phone screen flickered and died. The battery had frozen. "The flares," I gasped, my fingers so numb I couldn't feel the cabinet handle. "Chloe, find the flares. Now." Part 8. The final spark, the resolution. My fingers were useless. They felt like wooden sticks glued to my wrists. I fumbled with the cabinet, my vision tunneling as the blue zone mist swirled around my ankles. I could feel the hair on my legs turning into needles. "I got it." Chloe's voice was barely a croak. She shoved a plastic cylinder into my hands. It was a standard marine-grade road flare. I didn't try to use my fingers. I gripped the strike cap with my teeth and ripped it off. I slammed the flare against the abrasive strip with a desperate, guttural scream. Whoosh! A violent, blinding crimson light erupted in the small room. The heat hit us like a physical blow, a beautiful, searing pain that made my skin throb. The white mist hissed and retreated from the door, turning into harmless vapor. I didn't wait. I kicked the door open. The Cooper creature was right there, crouched to spring. When the red fire hit its face, it didn't just flinch, it shriveled. The frostbitten skin on its skull began to bubble and crack. It let out a sound I'll never forget. The sound of 1,000 frozen lakes cracking at once. It scrambled backward, shielding its milky eyes from the chemical glow. "Move. To the north exit." I roared, waving the flare like a sword. We sprinted across the gym. I passed Jax. I wanted to stop. I wanted to carry him. But I saw the way the janitor thing was already closing in from the shadows of the bleachers. Jax was gone. He was part of the school now. We reached the north doors. These were old-school manual crash bars, no electronics. I slammed into them with my shoulder. They were frozen shut. "Together!" I yelled. Leo, Chloe, and I threw our entire weight against the steel. The ice holding the doors hissed and popped under the heat of the flare. With a sound like a gunshot, the seal broke. The $-45 F wind hit us, instantly extinguishing the flare, but we didn't care. We tumbled out into the chest-deep snow. We crawled. We didn't look back. We reached the main road just as a massive orange glow appeared through the whiteout. A county snowplow, its heavy chains clanking. But this was a good clanking. This was the sound of the world coming back. 12 years later. I live in Arizona now. I don't even like it when the AC is set below 75. Leo survived, but he lost the arm. Chloe hasn't spoken a word to me since the funeral. The empty casket funeral. The school board claimed it was a tragic accident. A gas leak and unprecedented weather. They tore Lincoln Heights high down a year later. This morning, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a small, rusted piece of metal. It was a locker key. Number 412. Jax's locker. Attached was a note, written in a shaky, cramped hand on paper that felt damp and smelled like old oil. "It's getting cold again, Mark. We're still waiting for the bell to ring." I looked at the weather app on my phone. A cold front is moving south. I'm packing my bags. I'm not staying for the frost.